It is a very warm welcome to the show. Dean's Chair Professor at Massey University and the Director of the Care Centre, Mohan Dutta. Thank you for joining us this morning as we record this conversation, Professor. Welcome to the show.
Kia ora, Pat. Thank you for having me.
Kia ora. Hey, I want to talk to you about what happened in the weekend with Mr. Seymour, David Seymour. He was at an event and he did as the kids say, a shout out. He used a slogan. I'll call it a slogan for now. That some find very controversial, and maybe it's just me, but it seems that the media, I haven't seen very many in the media pick up on this, where there are other controversial statements, let's say said by people like Chloe Swarbrick, which the media dance all over as firmly and harshly as they can. We want to know more about what he said. In this instance, he may be a useful idiot. He may not even not know himself what he said, but I think it's important for us to talk it out, because if it is an offensive term to many, then we, the public, need to know. And to be honest, David Seymour needs to know as well. So this is at the event over the weekend at Eden Park in Auckland, and this is what he said. It's only, I think it might be 3 words, 2 or 3 words. It sounds like 2 words. It might be 3 words. And he says, Jai Shri Ram. Jai Shri Ram. Just listen to him saying it first of all.
Jai Shri Ram to the entire Bharat, and what a wonderful celebration of a monument that will last 1,000 years.
So there we go. The celebration was the consecration of a temple in India. That in of itself is controversial because the temple is on the site of a mosque, a former mosque. You'll have to correct me on these because I'm just getting the gist of it. And there's a lot of controversy even over the building of that temple on that site. If I'm correct in that very synopsized explanation, let's start off with Jai Shri Ram, and let's learn from you what that means and what Mr. Seymour has actually said, and also a bit like we talked about last night, what this actually says to a community about the New Zealand government now that he has said this. Sir.
Thank you so much, Pat. And that's an excellent summary. So to explain what the slogan Jai Shri Ram means and its connotation, we have to look a little bit at Hindutva, the far-right, almost fascist, cultural nationalist movement that really took form and gained momentum in India in the mid-1980s, and that is organized around transforming India as a Hindu nation or Hindu Rashtra based upon a monolithic Hindu jati or a Hindu race and a monolithic Hindu culture or Sanskriti. Now, Hindutva as a movement grew and drew its inspiration in the 1930s from the Nazi movements. And
Right.
it is organized around the goal of constructing India as a Hindu nation or Hindu Rashtra. So the Ram Janmabhoomi movement is a key pillar in the Hindutva ecosystem, in the sense that up until the 1980s, the political arm of the Hindutva organizations, which is the Bharatiya Janata Party, was a fairly fringe organization in the Indian parliament. But if you look at the BJP now, it is a hegemonic political party, having been elected 2 times. And what shaped this process is its organizing around that Ram temple that you're seeing today, where actually used to stand a 16th century mosque called the Babri Masjid. And the narrative that has been constructed by Hindutva is that there used to be the birthplace of Lord Ram. Now, Lord Ram is a mythological figure in Hindu religion, and this mosque was built on that site of the temple by destroying that temple. Now, there isn't really evidence to back that up, and the archaeological literature around it is quite contested. And certainly, this notion that Ram is a myth, so there is no evidence about this being the birthplace of Lord Ram per se, outside of the mythological sphere of religion, which is how most religions operate. So the slogan then, Jai Shree Ram, is an organizing slogan of Hindutva that is established around initially this process of the destruction of the Babri Masjid. So the VHP, or the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, that has been classified as a militant organization in multiple registers, organized the entire nation around the destruction of the mosque. And the way it organized is through hate speeches that were distributed through cassettes and then played on loudspeakers. This is the 1980s, early 1990s we are talking about, and through the chanting of the Jai Shri Ram slogan taken out as processions across the country in what would be called the Ratha Yatra, which ultimately led to the destruction of the mosque. Subsequently, then what we saw was a number of riots across India that saw a number of people dead, and a large proportion of them Muslims. And that slogan has been deployed for acts of violence, including in communal riots being chanted by Hindutva, in attacks on mosques. So you will see Hindutva processions chanting Jai Shri Ram as they attack mosques, in lynchings. Now, since the arrival of Narendra Modi, the current prime minister, into power, Hindutva has been legitimized. And what that has meant is that this kind of violence has become an everyday feature in across India. So when lynchings have been carried out targeting Muslims, the slogan Jai Shri Ram is chanted, and often then the Muslim person that is targeted is asked to chant that slogan as they are being lynched. So it is attached.
Can we just show people? So I'm very sorry to interrupt you. I don't normally interrupt, but can we just show people what you're talking about? This is off Wikipedia, and there are a number of violent incidents that have been listed as exactly what you're saying. There's lynchings in there. There's forcing the victim of the violence to chant it before the violence is perpetrated. People can just go and have a look at it themselves. Also in the political world. I'll read this out. In June 2019, the slogan was used to heckle Muslim MPs as they proceeded to take their oath in the 17th Lok Sabha. Pardon about my pronunciation. In July that year, a notable laureate stated in a speech that the slogan was not associated with the Bengali culture, leading to some unknown groups publishing his statement on Billboard in Kolkata. The slogan has also been used to heckle West Bengal Chief Minister, another name there, on multiple occasions, triggering angry reactions from her. So it is linked to these violent incidents. And I was just going to say, if people want to see more about what you're talking about, if you go to Wikipedia and you just look up the statement, the slogan, there are a bunch of things in there that it's been associated with. I guess what it'd be good to know for me, is like, is it a statement, is it a slogan that is really clearly saying and understood to mean what you're saying, or has it been co-opted? Like I think about on the 6th of January, when the riots in America, all those alt-right, far-right Americans were going, USA, USA, and the patriots, the far-right patriots in America have co-opted that saying, and now when you hear it chanted, you know what it means? Or is it something that's always had a birthplace and an origin in the sort of oppression of Muslims in the area?
What a beautiful question. First, I want to begin, with the notion, as a Hindu, with the notion that Hinduism itself is a plural, heterogeneous religion. There is no one register for Hinduism. So
Yep.
Ram is one among many deities. So you read that quote and that incident with Professor Amartya Sen, who was targeted for saying that Jai Shri Ram is attached with Hindutva. He's a Bengali, and so am I. And in our part of India, we are goddess worshippers. So we are worshippers of what would be called Shakti. And Ram is not a register in that sense. But, Lord Ram is a register for Indians in many parts of India. And in that sense, the saying Jai Shri Ram as an everyday saying, and that comes in many forms, in many linguistic features, is uttered as an everyday chant, in everyday practice, in contexts where people practice Hinduism in different parts of India and in the diaspora. But that has entirely been transformed by the Hindutva movement. So when you look at a slogan, and this is a critical part, as a communication scientist, I would say that any utterance needs to be looked at in context, right? So
Yep.
we have
Yep.
had these debates on from the river to the sea, and I have said that from the river to the sea, when voiced by those who are oppressed, who are experiencing a settler colonial occupation, it needs to be read in the context of resisting that occupation.
So
Now,
that you're talking about the Palestinians there. It's
yes,
said in a way of resistance, not in a way of elimination to the Jews. Because that's another question that we wanted to know.
yes.
Some controversial statements have multiple meanings to multiple people. Is this one of them? But please continue, sir.
Yes. So, but when you look at then a slogan like Jai Shri Ram that is mobilized by a political form of organizing that seeks to turn India into a Hindu nation, which means really by turning Muslims into second-class citizens, which is already happening, or
Right.
by removing Muslims from India, that becomes part of a majoritarian politics. And as scientists who have been studying this would say, a feature of two things. One is the turn of the state toward fascist politics, or almost fascist politics, where various
Right.
institutions of democracy are being dismantled. And the second part being the turn of the state toward a theocracy, where the state is constructed as Ram Rajya. So India's constitution, and it's a powerful exemplar of post-colonial democracy celebrated globally, where it ensconces the notion of secularism into its constitution, that is fundamentally being dismantled through
Yeah.
this process. And Jai Shri Ram needs to be read as part of that majoritarian populism.
And when you're talking about a theocracy, I mean, I liken it, and because it's my background and my upbringing, to a Christian nation. You're saying Hinduism is not a monolith; it's not one belief for all people. Much like Christianity, and it would be like as if a particular, let's say in America, because it seems to be the most obvious, a particular person became president, and he had a very conservative take on his Christian beliefs, making the whole country follow those beliefs. When we know that there are liberal Christians, there are middle of the road Christians, there are very conservative Christians. So I'm assuming what you're saying is much like that example, like a very certain type of Christianity, then if it was turned into a theocracy under this group, it would be a very certain type of Hinduism, which is not necessarily representative of all of Hindu. And it's a what I would think of as a far right fascist movement, as you describe it.
Yeah. So, a part of these far right fascist movement, and that's why I use that description, is the mobilization of religion as an anchor to nationalism. So, as you rightly
Yep.
pointed out, Christian nationalism is very different from the many strands of Christianity, and one would argue is actually a threat to the diverse forms of Christian practices. The
Agreed.
same way for Hindus, Hindutva is a threat to the diverse forms of flourishings of Hinduism. And, one of the things that is critical in this conversation is that Hinduism at its essence is a polymorphic faith practice, meaning that there are many, I mean, you think about the number of gods and goddesses and religious practices that Hindus have. It is as diverse as India is, with its linguistic practices and diverse cultural contexts. So Hindutva actually, when it mobilizes around this notion of Hindu nationalism, it threatens all those diverse forms. So to me, as a Kali worshipper, it would say that you're not a Hindu, you're a Hindu phobe,
Right.
or you're outside of the Hindu community because you question our form of
Yeah.
Hindu nationalism.
No, that speaks very clearly to the same the kind of Western world of Christianity. If you don't believe these things, then you're not a real Christian. That kind of stuff. And I said that's my Catholic upbringing, and my my addiction to American politics leads me to that understanding.
And
Let
that
me
also, just one
sorry.
thing, that is also, and that needs to be read as majoritarian populism, that is what it is. And one of the features of majoritarian populism then is organizing around a strong man. So like you compared to the US, like Trump,
Yeah.
Modi is a majoritarian strong man who is then seen as ruling over as a king not as a democratically elected leader, but as a king over this Ram Rajya, the kingdom of Lord Ram.
Gotcha. Now, I just want to bring it right back to where we started from as well, because this is an important part for us as New Zealanders to understand in our political sphere. We asked, what does Mr. Seymour using this statement say to that community? Does it say to them the New Zealand government supports your movement, or what does it say to them? But also, we talked about from the river to the sea. David Seymour himself, this is a tweet, if people are watching, can see that David Seymour says this from a tweet. I'm quoting him word for word. From the river to the sea appears in Hamas 27 constitution. Some people believe it means no Israel and even no Jewish people. UK Labour suspended an MP for using it last week. Our Jewish community lives in fear of anti-Semitism. Why aren't media asking her what she meant? So what I'm going to say to you and to the media in New Zealand is, why aren't media asking David Seymour what he meant when he said this controversial slogan? What should be happening now to address this by David Seymour? Like, I'm happy to accept maybe he's a useful idiot. Maybe there was a camera and they just said to him, "Oh, say this. It means welcome to the people," and he said it. But now it's been said, it's recorded, it'll go through that community you're talking about. What needs to happen next, and what does this say to that community? What does David Seymour need to do, if anything?
So, there are two parts to this. One is, you rightly pointed out to the chanting of the slogan. We also need to look at where that slogan is being chanted. It is being chanted in Eden Park at an event that is marking the celebration of the Ayodhya temple, which is a marker of the destruction of the Babri Masjid. So as a social scientist, I really can't get into intent. I don't understand what leads a politician into chanting a particular slogan that, say, is attached to very specifically a form of majoritarian populism that is deployed toward violence that is experienced by Muslims. But there are 2 points that I want to articulate here. Is that the Indian community in Aotearoa is very diverse. It is not just the Hindu community. There are Sikhs, there are Muslims, there are Dalit community members. So the question worth us asking is, what is the message then to Muslim community members in Aotearoa, Muslim Indian community members in Aotearoa, particularly in the backdrop of the Christchurch extremist occurrences, and particularly in the backdrop of activists such as Anjum Rahman, who have been pointed out that Hindutva is of concern in Aotearoa and it is not being given enough attention by crown structures and by media. And Pat, here, I want us to be reminded that this was the same kind of warning signal that was being given by Muslim activists building up to Christchurch. So the question there is, what is the message that is being received by Muslims in Aotearoa? And we need to listen to those Muslim voices, particularly the voices of Muslim Indians who are terrorized by both the Ram Janmabhoomi event, the celebration of the Ayodhya temple, and the chanting of the slogan. Coming back to your question about media and media interrogation, there also seems to be a pattern here that needs to be critically interrogated. We need to ask questions such as, are there particular biases in the ways in which the media ask questions? For instance, are there built-in Islamophobic registers in how media ask questions, the kinds of media frames that are circulated, what is erased, what is obfuscated, and what is foregrounded? This process of backgrounding and foregrounding needs to be interrogated. So a chanting of a slogan such as Jai Shri Ram is actually connected to violence. Even after the unveiling of the temple, just yesterday, we see social media rife with incidences where Hindutva mobs are targeting Muslim shops and Muslim neighborhoods, chanting Jai Shri Ram as a duet. So I just posted something on my X account that shows that there are these Hindutva mobs that are throwing stones at Muslim shops in Muslim neighborhood in Mumbai while chanting that slogan. So there is real violence that is going on currently. So it is really callous in that sense to amplify that slogan and for that not to be interrogated, particularly in Aotearoa. And this is significant given the context of Christchurch and the Royal Commission hearings on the attacks on the masjids.
So whilst you may not want to get into the deep weeds of this, it sounds to me like David Seymour, even if he has unwittingly supported this chant, should probably come out and retract and apologise. And as I've said twice now, he's been used as a useful idiot, needs to basically say, I didn't know what it meant, I didn't know the connotations, much like he was calling on Chloe Swarbrick to do for From the River to the Sea. If he is a man of honour and not a hypocrite, he now needs to do the same thing that he expects of other people to do when a slogan that is used has different meanings to different people. And as you say, because of the incidents in Christchurch as well, specifically here in New Zealand, what this may mean to Indian Muslims here, he needs to do something, at least explain that he was unaware of what it meant and apologise. That would be my position, at least anyway.
That makes sense. I also think that for the media, I will keep coming back to that. There is a critical component here in terms of looking at the funding of Hindutva, how its relationship is with the ACT party or with particular right-wing parties and those kinds of linkages. Because what I've heard from activists are there Hindutva-linked businesses or influential donors that are also linked with these political parties, which would then shape the kind of narrative making. That's one. The other point I want to also bring up is what I see, again, as a scientist who studies this phenomena, the convergence between the majoritarian populism of Hindutva and the majoritarian populism that catalyzes ACT and how ACT is organizing right now around the attacking of Teteriti and the messages around Maori. So one of the things I've seen on digital platforms in response to Mr. Seymour's posting this on his Facebook account, this event is particular posters that seem Hindutva posters going in and repeating the ACT messages, like this is about equality for all. Great that these changes are happening in Aotearoa. And I think we really need to look here in Aotearoa at the intersections of the anti-Maori sentiments that we are seeing. There has been quite a bit of good research on the role of networks like the Atlas Network in promoting that kind of anti-Maori sentiment and the relationship of that with the majoritarian populism of Hindutva. It seems like an archetypal feature of right-wing populist parties that are appealing to a far-right base.
I think that's very interesting, the point you made in that latest few comments about following the money to see the donors to ACT, who they were and if they're associated with this group or this belief system. Professor Mohan Dutta, thank you so much for joining us today. We really have appreciated chatting with you and bringing some more light to this. Hopefully we will get some answers from Mr. Seymour. Hopefully, at the very least, he'll be able to acknowledge that maybe for some people this wasn't the smartest or the best thing to say, and he can withdraw and apologise. But I guess, as they say, we shall throw this to the gods and see what comes from it, sir.
Kia ora. Thank you, Pat.